Hi guys, welcome to the fourth and final webinar for Be an iPad Artist. I am here to encourage you, first of all, to continue drawing on your iPad, but also to answer any questions that you might have that have come up in the last week of the course or at various other points that I haven't answered in previous webinars. So thanks for joining me here, and if you have any questions that you'd like me to address, please put them in the comments section and just put the word question in all caps followed by a colon and then your question so that I can quickly know exactly what you'd like me to do. I see that there's a number of people here already, and I don't see any questions yet. So why don't you start racking them up? Here's one. So this is from Artful Young. Is there a way to find out which brush you used within a layer where you might have used several different brushes? There isn't, I'm sorry to say. It's impossible really to separate the different lines that you might have made with different brushes. So no, there isn't. I mean, theoretically, if this was something that concerned you, you could, of course, use different brushes on different layers. That might be a bit fiddly, but at least you would have them separated. But no, in general, I mean, I would say it is probably a good idea to, well, as you use your brushes, you will find ones that you like the best. I have probably 5 or 6 that I use on a regular basis that I know best. And so that is one way of doing it. So you look at the line and you pretty much know how you did it. So that would be my response to that. You know, I think that would be kind of a cool feature for Procreate to have, but yet not, because I think in the end the focus really is on, you know, building the image that you like the most, as opposed to tracking all the different data that goes into it and separating it out. Because I think it might get very fiddly if you could always go back in and maybe, you know, theoretically you could like, well, what if I could take that same line and change the brush to a different brush, you know, and stroke my way through different settings. It might be, I don't know, it would seem like a very, very digital experience. So I'm sorry that that's not something that one can do. John Cromer has a question here. What are your thoughts on long-term storage of digital art? By long-term, I mean keeping things for your grandchildren's grandchildren. You know, that is excellent. I like the fact that you feel that proud of your work, that you want it to last for that long. It's hard to say. I mean, I would certainly imagine that Procreate may well not be around when your grandchildren's grandchildren are here. Will PDFs be around? PDFs seem to be the format that is saved, that is designed for archival purposes. That PDF was a technology that was developed by Adobe, and a lot of it is to have a universal kind of format that can be used on lots of different platforms. So I think if I was going to do it, I would probably save it as a PDF. And then I've had files that I've created decades ago on various computers, and certainly JPEGs and then things like Word files, those always seem to kind of endure. But I would say it's not a bad idea, if you have an archive of things that matter to you, to periodically like almost have like a sort of a digital hygiene project, where you might say every 5 years or every 3 years, I'm going to look at the files that I have and I'm going to maybe just check on them, see that they're still there, and also see, should I update, just open them up and close them and just see if they worked. Because one thing to remember is, where are you going to actually house them? Are you going to house them on a hard drive? So if you put them on a hard drive, that hard drive could fail. You could back up your hard drive and have multiples, but theoretically those hard drives, you know, those could fail too, and invariably you find that with technology, you don't end up having the right cables, you don't end up having the power supply that's correct. So you might want to save it on Dropbox or on iCloud and various other places that you don't own but are being maintained by somebody else. You could do that. However, what if they go out of business? So it's always a dicey proposition. You could also print them out, but what if those archival prints get ruined, or they're not true archival quality, and they somehow get affected by sunlight? I don't really know the answer. I think that there certainly are people who are trying to maintain digital files for the long term. But for me, I found that JPEGs have endured for 15 years. That technology has worked really well, as is PDF. So that would be my suggestion. But I hope that the world will be around. Your great-great-grandchildren are here. But let's see what happens. All right. What else can I answer here? So again, if you're joining us now and you have a question for me, please put it in the comments. I'd love to answer all your questions. Just put the word question in boldface at the top in all caps so that I know as I go through it what I'm answering. And Renata says, when you're using a pattern brush and you lift up the brush on purpose or accidentally, is there a way to get the pattern to realign with what's already there? You know, I've had that problem too. And let me just demonstrate what she's talking about, because I think that it's an excellent question and I don't have a great answer to it. But let me just choose a pattern, and let me swap over here so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so the question is, what happens if, for instance, you use grid? Right, grid is great. It's all the grids lining up. Now, if I lift up my pen and I go back down, my grid hasn't lined up again. So that is a potential problem. I wonder if using I was going to say, I wonder if using something like your your drawing guide maybe a drawing guide would help. Would it? No, it doesn't help. So no, I don't have an answer, I'm afraid. Boy, I hate when I don't have an answer, but maybe assisted drawing. Let's see if that works. Nope, doesn't work either. So yes, I'm afraid that doesn't work. That's the problem with these pattern brushes, is there's such an artificial thing to have a grid be drawn like that as opposed to hand drawing a grid. But there's clearly a problem of alignment. So don't lift your brush up is all I can say for now. Another thing that you could do, here's another solution. I have another idea. And I don't know if this will work for all of your different patterns, but let's say, let's clear this layer. So say theoretically I did this. For some reason I have assisted, turn that off. Okay, so say I made that part and then I did this and it wasn't lining up. What I could do is I could do it on another layer, my second thing, and then I could slide it over and line it up. You see? So now it's lined up, and then I could merge it down, and now they're the same layer. Is that clear what I did? So I did my second piece of this pattern on a separate layer, and then of course I could move the layers. So that is theoretically a solution to this problem. Genius, don't you think? I just figured that out on the spot, but who knows, there might be a better way of doing this. So there you go. Is there any way to logically remember what different ways layer settings work? I don't really know. I think that when it comes to things like multiply, I explained a lot of things about layers in the last episode, and I sort of did a lot of technical homework sort of a month ago when I talked to you about that. And there are things that that it's doing when there are things that the names suggest. So let's have a look here, and I'll show you what I mean. And this is stuff that maybe you might need to do your own research on it. But so for instance, multiply. What multiply is doing is it's taking this new color this new layer that you're putting in, and it is multiplying the effect of it on the layer below. So what that means is it's an exponential thing. So if it's a value of 2, let's say, it's multiplying this layer above by that value. So it's making it both darker, and it's multiplying the effect of all the effects of that layer's textures, luminescence, hue by the thing below it. That doesn't really explain much, but that's in essence what it's doing. So there's a difference, for instance, between multiply and screen and add. Multiply, screen, and add have similar kinds of effects in that it is putting the content of one layer on top of another layer so you can see it through. But how well you can see it through depends on whether it's multiplying it or simply adding it. So if it is, boy, I'm really being inarticulate about this. I'm sure there's more clearer ways of explaining this. Let me see if I can think of one. Let me get a clear line here. So all right, so here is my layer, and I'm going to use a color that is I'm afraid I'm not doing a good job of this, and I feel like maybe I need to I'll make a little document where I can lay this stuff out more specifically, because it is fairly complex. I don't know that you will fully understand the formula that describes them, even if I put it down in words. But I will say that from my experience, a lot of times it requires clicking through and trying different effects. So rather than necessarily fully understanding what the effect is going to do, you might have to see what it's going to do, because it is going to vary depending on what's on the layers below, whether those colors are lighter or darker, whether how those hues combine. So for instance, red laid over blue is going to behave differently than red laid over yellow, and so forth across the spectrum. So a lot of times what I do is I just end up, frankly, trying stuff out and then kind of remembering what an effect is and using it again. I can't say I fully understand what is happening, and that's why I'm sort of hesitating and trying to explain to you now. But I think, honestly, a lot of the time, simple trial and error has worked the best for me. But I will, and in the last webinar 3, I did explain it in some more detail and did explain some of the theory, and I'll try and put that down so that you can understand it more. Sorry, Marla, I haven't done justice to your very important question. Okay, Julie asks, will you guys ever, I actually have somebody who wants to buy or use or buy one of my pieces. Now what? Will you guys ever offer a class on how to manage an illustration or art business? We came a little bit close when we did Illustration Nation, which talked a lot about the process of being an illustrator. First of all, Julie, congratulations. That's amazing. That's awesome. But secondly, I would say we are working on a course that is going to come out in the first half of next year that is going to be about how to basically self-publish a book, the whole process that you go through, including how do you raise money for it. But also it's going to be, it's going to apply to other aspects of buying and selling your work. So yes, we will have an answer for that. In the meantime, if you took Illustration Nation, you could email Penelope Dullahan, who taught it, and she would probably be able to give you some advice as well. But that's fantastic news. I'm so glad that that has happened to you. Can you recommend a book on Procreate that a person could go to quickly for answers to questions as we are working on a piece? Yes, I would strongly recommend the Procreate Handbook. I have not seen any other book that compares with it. It breaks down every single feature of Procreate and explains it in depth. And it's free. And I explained at the very beginning of the class how to get it. I would get it, put it on your iPad, put it into iBooks so that you can easily access it and find it. But honestly, I think if you want to follow along, that is the best way to do it. So I realize I haven't managed to cover every technical aspect of Procreate, in part because I don't know them all, but that's why I recommended that handbook from the beginning. It's what I used. I've looked at a couple of other books. I didn't find them terribly useful. Books, by and large, are not, a great medium for this sort of thing, but that has been very useful to me, so I hope it's helpful to you too. Okay, again, if you have a question for me, please put the question in the question form. So Raynell asks, question form meaning put the word question and then put your question so that I can easily find this, find it on this platform. Raynell asks, do you have plans for another class for advanced Procreate? I've been thinking about that. I would love your feedback on this. I have the feeling that we put way too much into this class, that maybe I should have broken it up into pieces. But it would be interesting to go more deeply into a lot of these things and for me to tell you more after you've taken this first one. We've never done that kind of a sort of stage by stage, follow-up 2.0 version of any class that we've done. So it would be a new thing for us. But Procreate 5 is going to be coming out soon, and when it does, I need to study it and see, does it change any of the things that I've talked about in this class? I have the feeling it won't. I have the feeling it will build on it. So maybe that would be the answer, is to do that. It depends, frankly, on how many people are interested, because that would make it worth our while. It takes a lot of effort to make these classes, and it means not doing other classes. So that would be really the question, is would enough people be interested in doing a follow-up? And also, frankly, do I know enough to tell you more? I know a fair amount, but I'd be glad to share it with you. Maybe we could do a workshop, could be another idea, is to do a workshop. We're thinking about doing kind of live, like 3-hour weekend workshop types of things. Again, if that would be of interest to you, let me know. But yes. So Renata asks, I really enjoyed all the demos you shared, including the YouTube master video. Do you have any specific recommendations for people you think would be helpful to follow on YouTube? I don't follow many. There's a guy named Brad Colbow, I think it is. Colbow. But again, I could link to a couple of people. There's really only 2 or 3 that I've followed. But I will share you their names. I don't have them handy right now. But generally I've looked at who are the people who are frankly popular, because popular people tend to be the ones who are answering a lot of questions. But yes, I would be glad to do that. I frankly also look at Instagram a lot. I just like to see what people do with Procreate. So Instagram is a great source for that. All right. Yes, so there seems to be some enthusiasm for 3-hour workshops, and maybe we will do those. I'm working on a way, frankly, to do something that would be like this, a live workshop. So you'd get to ask questions and discuss things, and we would be able to maybe record it. And so if you couldn't make it to the live event, you could come back and you could watch it later on. We also might be able to even do things in person. So that's something we're thinking about doing, not just specifically for Procreate, but in general. What would it be like to have a live workshop that you could come to a room and sit with any one of us while we're teaching, or watch it online and comment on it, or watch it later on in a recording. It's just a thought we're having. So yeah, so there's some interest in doing live things and doing workshops. That's great. That's exciting to know. We're also working on something super cool that you will know about in about a month, that will be something completely different. All right, so I see some of you have not followed the protocol. Shocking. So I'm going to see if I can scroll through and find your answers, but it would make my life easier if you actually put in the word question. Is there a way to cut, copy, and paste an element from my design or from an imported picture? I can't figure out how to do it with the selection tool. An element from my design. Well, I guess one way would be if your design was in Photoshop, I guess you could import, I think you can import separate layers, and that would be one way of isolating it. The selection tool is one way of doing it, but as I talked about, there's lots of different parts of the selection tool that you could use. You know, so for instance, you could use the, when it comes, let me just go to this selection thing. So let me, all right. So for instance, this is a piece of some elements I made. So this is on one layer, this arm. This arm is on one layer. And you can use your selection tool, not just freehand to do that kind of thing if that's problematic for you, but instead automatic. Whoops. So you can use the automatic thing to highlight and select the whole thing like that. So then everything that is that color is now separated, you see? And so using automatic and then just touching on the thing that you want to select, that might be helpful to you. You can also do it, you can also add to your selection by clicking on the, so for instance, if I do automatic and I select everything that is this one color, and now I want to add this pen, I can just click on add. Well, I can't do it in automatic, but I can do it in freehand. So now I can go to add, and I can, you know, I could select just this part, and I could add that to my selection. So there are various tools that you can use in conjunction with each other. You don't have to use only one form of selection. You can then add another piece to select. So now I can select, well, let me just see. So you can build your series of selections by using different tools to do it. Play around with the selection tool. It's actually much more, has a lot more to it than I described in the class, because I didn't deal with things like feathering, and feathering allows you to have soft edges to your selection rather than hard ones. There's a lot of different elements to play with that, that you might find useful. Let me see if there's any other questions in here. Is it possible to have two Procreate canvases open at the same time, side by side? I've never tried that. I don't know. It would be helpful because sometimes you might want to copy from one and paste into the other, but I have the feeling that you can't, because when it comes to, when you go to the gallery, you can't really select more than one. I mean, you could select two different ones, but then I don't know how you would open them, because as soon as you touch one, it would just deselect it. So that doesn't really help you. So I think you could maybe theoretically, you could open it in a separate window. That might help you. But I don't think you can open the same app in two different windows. You can't. So no, the answer is no. Procreate has these limitations. It's still a fairly, you know, it doesn't have the power of Photoshop in some regards. But there is this sort of Procreate killer that Adobe is about to bring out. I don't know very much about it, but it is going to be sort of Photoshop's answer to Procreate, and maybe that will have those kinds of tools. All right, Michael says, I'd like your opinion of this option. It might be interesting doing a class that is more about creating art than technical. How about a class with multiple artists and how they approach Procreate? That is interesting. This class, I've kind of gone back and forth between explaining the details of Procreate, the functionality of it, and how the tools work, at least from my experience of them, and also trying to inspire you a little bit by showing you work that I've done, and also some of my kind of larger thoughts about digital art. It would be interesting to bring in some other artists and to see how they work and how they use it. That would presuppose, I mean, I think we do that with drawing all the time. We don't just explain the technical parts, we show you other parts of it. So that would certainly be something to think about. Might be a somewhat boring class to film, just because it would be a bunch of people sitting at tables with iPads, but it could be done. I know a number of artists who use the iPad, and more of them are all the time, so that could be a direction to go as well. So yes, that was a good suggestion, John. I'll certainly take it into account. I'm not sure, frankly, how far I want to go with Procreate. You know, whether I want Sketchbook School to really become all about Procreate. You know, we're about to do this amazing class on mixed media journaling, and so that might be, we might go in more different analog directions. I don't know. We have a lot of plans for next year. None of them involve Procreate so far. We've kind of done that, but we may delve deeper into it. I'm glad that you are enthusiastic about it. I think there's more to learn. There certainly is. So, how is the mask layer used? Why do we have it there in Procreate? Well, I did a whole tutorial on that, on the mask layer. It is something that is very useful, and I kind of hesitate to go into it again, frankly, because I did do a whole chapter on mask layers. So if you have a problem with that, if you feel like there were things I didn't answer specifically, let me know and I'll see what I can do. But I kind of feel like I can't use the webinar for that today, sorry. Am I not answering more questions than I'm answering? I have that feeling. Okay, so Anne brings out, yes, fresco. Okay, so it has a vector art, vector line drawing. Again, not something that I feel is useful for the kind of art that I make, where you can draw very specific lines and use vectors, vector points. I wouldn't be surprised if Procreate added something like that in the future, but so Fresco is the Adobe app that I referred to before. Maybe somebody wants to try it out. I don't. I'm happy with what I've got. Okay. Good. So, yes, a lot of interest in live workshops. That's great. So, yeah, I mean, I think also the iPad is going through a transformation right now. You know, there's this, for the first time, it's now called the iPad OS, which is allowing you to do a lot of things that you couldn't do before in terms of separating windows and so forth. I think that there's still a problem, and that is this file management issue. I think it's still really cumbersome to save your Procreate files externally. I mean, my dread is that I'm going to lose my iPad or break it or something terrible is going to happen. In fact, I did on this trip I was on this week. I lost the tip of my pencil has now been circumcised, for lack of a better word. So, yeah, so I feel like their ability to be able to save and create a folder system, all that kind of thing is still a limitation for Procreate. As you make more and more images, you'll start to see that they are harder and harder to move around, and backing it up is kind of cumbersome. You still have to plug your computer in. You can try and back it up to Dropbox, but it's really an elaborate process that I dread, and I do it periodically, but it should be a lot easier. So I think that that's something that they have to work on. I'm sure are, because Procreate, is the company that makes it, is very responsive. So, all right, Meg has a question. Is there a way to work on a canvas simultaneously? To work on canvases? Are you asking again about working on multiple canvases simultaneously? I think so. Is that? Yeah, I think that's the same thing. Somebody else asked me, can you open more than one file at the same time? You can't. I agree with you. It would be great to be able to copy. I mean, one thing you can do is you can duplicate an image that you like, and then take this copy that you made and manipulate that while preserving your initial one. So that can sometimes be helpful if you want to just take those elements and do something differently with them. But no, I don't really have the answer. Okay. Can you share any additional information about upcoming classes and events in Sketchbook School? I'll talk a little bit about it. This isn't ideally the format for it, just because this is a webinar, but we have a whole new program that's going to be about developing creative habits that I think is going to be really great. It's essentially a coaching program that we are working on. We're also working on, as I said, these live workshops that will work in a number of different ways. We have the mixed media journaling class that's going to be starting in a couple of weeks that I think is really exciting and a lot of people are interested in. It involves everything from collage, rubber stamps, all kinds of media like acrylics and watercolors and colored pencils and markers, but also the idea of journaling and using art making as a way to do self-healing, to do self-expression, to record your life, your feelings, your thoughts. And I think it's something very interesting to me. So that is something that we're thinking about. What else can we say? Oh, another thing that's coming up is my book, How to Draw Without Talent. It's going to be, I'm supposed to be getting my first copies this week, and it's going to be available in bookstores in just about a month, less than a month, November 26th, I believe. It will be in stores, in Barnes & Noble, in Amazon, and various other places. I'm pretty excited about that. It's the first Sketchbook School book that's coming out. Robert says, I've been thinking about using Procreate exclusively during the mixed media course. I can always do the homework in analog if I choose. What do you think about that? Wow. So that you would just use, well, I think it would be difficult. I think it would be fun. I had thought about the same thing, which is basically rather than using, I don't know how you would do rubber stamping and things like that, but one of the things that's great about this course is that it's also about how different media integrate with each other. How, for instance, layering on gesso on top of acrylics, how they interact with each other, and also how serendipitous accidents happen. That's a key part of mixed media journaling, is how things integrate and accidents happen that you hadn't planned on. And then weird things come up, and then you have to do interesting things in response to them. So that's pretty cool. But if you're really into Procreate, I mean, I am too, honestly. I mean, you can go out and buy a bunch of, I mean, it's sort of like, if you imagine finger painting, what would that be like on the iPad? I guess you could do it. You could use your fingers to paint with, but it wouldn't be quite as tactile. But yes, it could be fun. It could be fun. And I think for those, if any of you are mixed media artists or collage artists, I mean, I've done collage, as I've talked a bit about in this class, and it was really fun, and it was pretty easy, and you didn't have to worry about scissors and glue. So yes, that would be fun. David has a question. If I sketch a portrait, can you please review how I can add a solid colored background? Well, sure. I mean, that's a fairly simple thing to do. Let me just show you. So here we're in the iPad. Here, in fact, this is a portrait that I drew of Blue. And I drew this portrait. So this is a dog that I was visiting with last week, and this is exactly what his fur looked like. Had gotten a haircut, and he had this, and what this is actually is I took a photograph I'd taken of some shag carpeting, and I layered it in there. And made that. But anyway, so changing the background is fairly straightforward. You just go to your background color, and you can change it to whatever you want. Just change your color. So you can move it around. So there's your drawing is on one layer, your background color is somewhere else. I hope that's what you meant. If it isn't, please tell me more. I'm going to go back to Blue's blue background because his name is Blue. Okay. Hope that's helpful. All right, Meg has a two-part question. When I color drop into a new shape on a layer where I already have color down, often the fill opacity isn't 100%. Sometimes it even tints the rest of the layer. I've had that experience too, and sometimes it has to do with your slider, with the. So let me just show you what I mean. So there's a slider that defines the tolerance. Let me get rid of these. So I'll make this into a normal layer. So let's draw the shape, and now I want to fill it in, and I drop it. Now you see at the top it says color drop threshold. Can you see that? 37.3%. And as I slide it, that number goes down. And then it goes up. When it goes up too high, it goes outside of the circle. And so that can be something that you can control. Now this particular shape is very clean and very clearly defined, so therefore it is easy to fill. Let's try a shape that's maybe a little less easy to fill, like that. So when I drop in, you see I'm getting that line around the edge. Can you see that line? Not sure if you can see it like there, but you see that line that formed? So that's the result of the threshold not being high enough. But I can, as I raise the threshold, it goes away. But I have had that experience that you've described, which is that sometimes you drop a color in, and suddenly the whole thing seems to go wonky. And I'm not sure what the reason for that is, in short. I can't demonstrate it here for some reason. It's, of course, one of those things, an error that I can't reproduce. And I'm trying to think of what I've done to solve it. I think increasing my threshold has frankly been the easiest solution, which is by sliding that along. And was I clear on how I did that? So basically I'm sliding my let's see if I can show you this way better. So now you can see my hand. So as I'm moving my hand back and forth, it is changing this threshold number here. Oops, I can't see it. See? That number is going up and down because I'm sliding my hand across. So that's the thing that varies it. Let's see what the second part of her question was, though. Where is the second part of the question? Here it is. I've checked that my shape is closed with a thick line. Okay, layers on normal mode. What's going on? Thanks. Yeah, let me investigate that, okay, and see if I can find the answer, because I have had that experience, and it is annoying because you just wanted to drop in a pure color, and yet somehow that color is compromised. It suddenly is diluted, or it's changing the color of everything. I can't reproduce it here, so I can't think of how I solved it, but I know I have, and I know I've encountered the problem, and I'm pretty sure I know how I've solved it. So let me experiment with that and make a little demo for you and explain it. Okay? That's my promise to you. Does the How to Draw Without Talent book follow the course on Sketchbook School? It doesn't follow it, meaning that it is based on it. It covers some of the material, but it goes way, way further. It's a big, not long, it's a biggish book. And it contains some of the, I would say, if you read the book and then you took the course would show you demonstrations of stuff that I talk about in the book, but the book contains way more. And it also contains contributions and ideas from other members of the Sketchbook School faculty. It is, in fact, the first Sketchbook School book. So it is more. I would say if you took the course and you want to learn more, buy the book. If you didn't take the course, buy the book and then take the course. But I think they're companions, but there is more to the book than there is to the course. How's that for an answer? Will the group continue to share and connect after day? You mean the group on Schoolyard? I sure hope so. I hope that we'll continue doing this. I want to. The course is really for people who are interested in this. I think people are going to continue taking this course, I'm hoping, besides those of us who are the initial people. This course will continue to be available to take, and more people will take it in the future. So yes, this course will live on, and I hope that we will all share our experiences. And also give me stuff, frankly, when new questions arise and people say, how do you do this, like a couple of you have today, that will be where I will answer them. So that will be great. But as Morgan says here, the group will be available, and we hope you'll continue to work through lessons. Yes, thank you, Morgan. Jules has an answer, perhaps. Something to do with the actions taken on previous layers, example, masks and references. Right. And that's the problem, is that when you have a particularly complex series of events and then you do something and you're never quite sure, was it caused by that sequence of events that preceded it, or is it something that you're doing right now that's wrong? That's one of the confounding things, not just Procreate, but frankly a lot of things to do with the computer. So, you know, again, I wish I was one of those guys who like knew everything, like who was like chatting behind the scenes with Procreate and said, oh yeah, I've spoken to the head engineers and this is what they say. I'm not. I'm just some random person who happened to have used the thing for a couple of years, and I told you what I know. I hope it's been helpful. But I like these kind of problems because I like to figure out how to solve them, because a lot of times they're problems that I've had and I haven't really focused enough to kind of make sure that I have the answer to it. Thinking about layers has helped me, and it's also made me more adventuresome, frankly, in some of these layer settings than I used to be, by understanding a bit more how they work. So it's definitely a good process. And frankly, I'm hoping that, speaking of our group, I'm hoping that this is the type of collaboration that can go on. So if you guys figure something out that I haven't, please share it and teach me, because that's what I'm hoping is the process. So John says, I'll be in the playground for years, probably. It's not a playground, John. It's a schoolyard. School first, then the yard. But you can play there too. Yes. Corinne says, I've done homework for how to draw that talent, and that looks really real on my iPad. I've also used photos of painted texture paper for backgrounds for Procreate projects. I love that. So in other words, what she's saying is, she is now using her iPad for really all forms of art making. And that means that sometimes she is, you know, and how to draw without talent, certainly drawing with a pen or the equivalent thereof on the iPad makes total sense. That looks really real, similarly. In fact, drawing on the iPad to do cross-hatching, things like that, is phenomenal. But also integrating photos of painted textures and paper as backgrounds for Procreate projects. That I love too, and that's something that I like to do as well, is, you know, if rather than trying to figure out, well, how do I make something look just like watercolor on Procreate because I want to have that effect in my Procreate piece, don't. Just make some watercolor and import it. Take a picture of a watercolor texture, maybe take pictures of several watercolor textures and layer them on top of each other using different settings and see how that comes out. And you might end up with watercolory looking effects that you couldn't have done in watercolor. You know, so I think that is a great idea. That's really good, Corinne. You know, I think there was a course last year where I did study halls, and I did all my study halls. Was it Imagining? I'm trying to remember what class it was. It might have been the Whimsical Sketchbook. Anyway, there was a class where Stefan taught us about making ink blot monsters, and how to take the same ink blot and then make different things out of it. Or that's not actually what he taught us. He taught us how to make an ink blot and then turn it into a monster. What I did is I made an ink blot, put it into Procreate, and then I did all different kinds of things with that same ink blot, because I could, and I couldn't have done that on paper. So I did collage-y kinds of things. I did, you know, just that one ink blot kind of in a Rorschachian kind of way inspired me to do lots of different things, different exercises with it. So that's it. Okay, Tina. Okay, you've answered your own question. again, I'm changing the threshold by sliding it. Okay, so David, okay, Ray, the background color. What if the sketch is not in color, just a line drawing, for example? That shouldn't be an issue. Let me see if I can find an example for you. In other words, if you wanted to have a colored background behind a line drawing, you know, that is certainly a simple thing to do. Let me share my iPad with you and show you. For instance, here's a bunch of life drawings that I did, and you know, you can see any given one of them. It just has a different color background. So this is actually, I shared this, I think, in the class, which is these are all these layers of quick drawings that I did. But yeah, so I just changed the background color, and you can change it to whatever you wanted to. So it will sit nicely behind the line drawing, whether even if it's black and white, it doesn't really matter. That should be fine. Is that clear, Dave? Again, I will be glad to go deeper into it if you have more thoughts to it. All right, any other questions? Maria Luisa says, I have downloaded a watercolor textured paper, so if anybody wants a copy, I can try to share it. Yes, or just take a picture of a piece of watercolor paper with your iPad. You know? I mean, what I do is, I mean, I think I've shared this a bit, but I like to go in, let me show you something. Okay, I'm going to show you something that's not Procreate for a second. Watch this. So here's my photos thing. These are pictures of this new dog that my in-laws just got, my sister-in-law. But I have a folder here called Textures. Check it out. Remember I told you about that dog drawing that I did where I had the shag carpeting? There it is, shag carpeting. So I have all these pictures. So I'm walking down the street, I see some painted walls. I see a brick wall. I see it was in a building that had crumbling plaster. Took a picture of it. You know, graffiti, and these are actually pictures that I took in Paris of close-ups of Monet paintings, because I just love that texture, bricks and crayon, chalkboard. This is in my friend Jean-Christophe's bathroom. He had these cool tiles. I've used that a lot of times. Those textures, they're really great. Stains on a stucco wall, bits of lettuce, wood paneling. But then I also have these kinds of things that are organic. So that's just white paint on cardboard, which is really great when you go in close. You see that? That's a great way to add paper texture to something. You know, all these different things, bricks, different shapes, just watercolor abstractions. Use those 1,000 times. Really great to just layer your stuff on. I mean, that you could try and make that in Procreate. Why bother? Just drop some watercolor and some salt on the watercolor, and you'll have these really cool shapes and textures. So there you go. Behind the scenes. Tricks of the trade. What else? Gina says, I'm going to continue to integrate analog with digital. I found that using both takes up. Yes, I agree. To me, digital art, as I've said in this class, the idea of just pure digital feels cold, feels inhuman, feels frankly out of date. But there are limitations also to working just purely analog. But also I like the tactile feelings of analog, but it doesn't mean I can't do that. You know, I love using like a nice squishy fountain pen to draw with, but then I might want to do other stuff with that drawing. So I find the thing that I find my least favorite is when I see people doing a drawing and then bringing it into Procreate and then like using like the fill or the airbrush tool or those kinds of things to just color it in like it was a coloring book. It always looks kind of off to me. The colors don't have an organic feel. It just doesn't look right. I like things that either look kind of cartoony, and that's why you're using bright fill colors, or that feel more organic, but also kind of odd, like what is that? I don't quite know how you made that. It's an integration of different things that feel differently. You know, organic things can feel differently than digital things, but the combination can also feel like yet another thing. That to me is the expressive thing that I'm interested in. Eliza says, I play a game with myself called 3 Circles on Procreate. On one layer I draw 3 circle type shapes. On another layer I create a person in action using the circles. That is hilarious. So in other words, you have to then respond to it as if it was like a random doodle. I love that. Are you familiar with the work of Christoph Niemann? He's a guy who is a German designer, and he's been doing amazing things with combining illustration, often with photography. He had a piece in the New York Times last weekend about Brexit. It was really brilliant. He took all these photographs and then he drew cartoon characters on top of them. But he also does a thing that's called Sunday Projects, where he'll take some random picture, like a picture of a banana, and then he'll turn it into something totally unexpected by just adding a few lines on top of it. So you can also do that kind of thing where you combine a photograph with a Procreate drawing, which I think is really fun. I think I've shared a bit of that I've done, but it's just, it's can be really random, can be, here, let me show you this as an example. Like that's a picture that I took of my feet sitting on the balcony, and then, so it was originally this picture, and then I just added some sky, and I kind of redrew the railing, and I added a lawn, and then I added some birds and the sunshine. So that turned that picture into something quite different, quite cool. Where did I go? So, yes, so that kind of merging of two different things, or just this is my dog, and this is what he looked like just lying there, and then I gave him longer legs and a different face. I showed you this thing before. Just took a picture of those hands and then drew that guy on top of it. That's a sort of Christoph Niemann type thing to do. A bit more literal perhaps with him, but playing games like that, love that. It's a great way to stretch your creativity. Kit says, I'm experiencing a mental block about how to use the masking tools when making my day-to-day drawings. Do you have any of your own drawings that you could share where you have used masks? Yeah, I mean, I use masks as an element. I've been using, you know what I've been using quite a lot recently is, let me show you something. Well, this blue is a good example. So what I did here is this layer is actually a clipping mask. So that's a picture of that carpeting. Whoops, I'm not sharing it with you. Hold on a second. Sorry. So this is that picture of that carpeting that I mentioned. So I took a picture of this orange carpeting, and then I selected this part of his body, and you see how it kind of doesn't sit, it overlaps it, but then I made it into a clipping mask, and it just filled that section. So that's an example of using a mask as a way of filling stuff in with a texture. And then I also, you know, I can also like multiply it, or I could do other things to make it just stand out and contrast a bit more. I also turned down the opacity on it really far, so that made it simpler and less overwhelming than it would have been if it was full up. So that's an example of using a mask, I guess. All right, I think this is going to have to be our last question. It's still about David's background issue. What if the sketch is not in color, just a line drawing? What if you want to keep the image white, but not be the background color? Keep the image white. In other words, you had done the drawing in white? Is that what you meant? Or you wanted to have, I think I know what you mean. So in other words, if you had done a drawing and you didn't want to fill in the parts in between, like for instance, okay, so for instance here I had done this drawing of me, of this thing, but if I change the background color to blue, it makes this, what were white stripes, become the dark blue of the background. So theoretically, if I wanted to make them white, what would I do? Again, I haven't shown you. Let me show you again. Sorry. All right, so here's this drawing that I had done, and the background was white. And now I want to change the background color to something like blue. But what happens is now the whites of his eyes and the white stripes of his shirt are no longer correct because the background has changed. So what I would do to fix that is I would add another layer. I would put it underneath it. I would take a white pen and I would color it in like that. And it's sitting right beneath, it's sitting right behind those lines. And then I would also color in his eyes. So now you can see this is that shape. And when I layer this on top, now it's filled in. So basically what you can do is create a shape that sits underneath your drawing that is white, if that's what you want. If you don't want the in-between parts to take on the color of the background. Does that help? I think that's what you're asking. If not, email me or text message me on the yard and I'll see what else I can do to help you. Ann says, what's the best source for backgrounds and photos do-it-yourself purchase? I don't know. As I showed you, I just take pictures on my phone all over the place. You can Google. I mean, and that's fairly useful. Just make sure that they're high enough resolution that you can, when you do a Google image search, you can set the parameters and say, I want it to be larger than, say, 800 pixels by 800 pixels. Make sure that it's big enough so you don't get any kind of bit mapping. But the simplest thing is to take photographs. The photographs on your phone are generally like 2,500 pixels square. So they're always going to look nice and crisp. But just start collecting stuff. But yeah, if it's something that you can't find, like, I don't know, fish skin or something, then there are other solutions. All right. When you use the ribbon tool to select an element within a picture and then you resize just that element, can you avoid a change in resolution of that element? I don't think so. I think what you could do is you could probably up-res the entire thing, make the whole thing larger, and then do your ribbon change, and then down-res it if you wanted to. But I would say no. It's taking that small piece and it is changing the resolution. It is keeping the resolution the same, but when you've expanded it, it is going to be bitmappy. So no, that is a problem that you're going to have. Okay, I think that has to be the final question. Maria says, thank you for the course. I learned a lot. Enjoy getting to know you in the sketchbook school. Well, thank you to all of you. This has been a great course for me. I've learned so much from you and from your questions and from the art that you've been making. There are so many other things that we can do with the iPad and with Procreate, and I hope we can all continue to explore them together. I hope you'll follow me on Instagram and you'll be able to see the stuff that I'm making. I'm trying to make new things all the time and to post them and share them. There's a lot of things to play with this course, and I will probably continue to use it in Draw With Me's, which I do most Thursdays at noon Eastern Standard Time, so you can come and see me work on stuff there. And I also hope if this is the first course you've taken at Sketchbook School that you'll try your hand at some of the other things that we teach too. There are lots of interesting directions that we can take your creativity, and that's what we're here for. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for waiting for a couple of weeks for this webinar. I think it was a good idea because some of you seem to have answered your own questions, but I know there's a lot in this course and there's a lot of stuff to do. So if you continue to have questions, just again, stay in the schoolyard. You can stay in the schoolyard forever. You can access this class forever. So as new things come up, get in touch with me, ask other people. If you find answers to things on your own and you want to share them with the rest of us, that would be awesome. We would all love to know it. thank you so much for being part of this class. And stay tuned for, as I said, mixed media journaling coming up next. And then, of course, new classes and new events and new experiences and new excitement to come. And, of course, How to Draw Without Talent, the book, a perfect Christmas present for everybody you know. I hope you'll pick it up. Thanks again for joining me, guys. And thanks for being an iPad artist. Bye-bye.